The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time is one of those landmark titles in gaming. It introduced so many amazing characters and environments, making it feel like the most complete and expansive game up to that point. This game simply cannot be topped, except somehow it was. The atmosphere, the characters, the side quests. Majora's Mask takes everything great about Ocarina and just keeps amping it up. The townsfolk of Clocktown all feel so real. Each NPC has detailed interactions with one another, and I swear these characters' voices will be seared into my subconscious forever. I've always been inspired by this game, and as a child I dreamt of making a game which has complex character interactions like this one. So without further ado, allow me to introduce you to the game's first NPC. Isn't he handsome? The NPC shares the same functionality as the game's enemies. Each one can be targeted and cycled between, but they also have unique functions of their own, such as dialogue. I want the characters to interact with each other in ways that reflect their roles in the environment. And I think a great example of this is in the first Little Nightmares game. Deep in the bowels of the ship, stowaway children are trapped like rats in cages by the janitor of the lower decks, who packages them up and sends them on their way to the next floor of the vessel, where they are processed in the kitchen area by the twin chefs who are using their meat as ingredients. The meat gets processed into sausages, which then get eaten by the ship's guests. It's a great story thread that runs throughout the entire game, albeit a really dark one. I've spent a lot of development time creating interconnected areas for the castle. I've blocked out a bunch of new locations such as kitchens, gardens, a library,
a saloon, a dining room, pantries, wine cellars, a study, corridors.
Castles have a lot of rooms. The lower parts of the castle are a little more grounded in reality than the floors coming up later on, so I wanted each room to feel like it serves some kind of function within the larger structure. I want to make the character interactions that take place in each location ripple through the entire castle, resulting in a complex web of cause and effect. If you intervene in one place, it can lead to unexpected outcomes elsewhere. As an example, I have this dining area that you can access the kitchen from via a dumbwaiter. If you choose to add a dubious ingredient to the meal that's cooking down here, it may result in some of the characters getting sick after dinner time. I'm just spitballing here, I haven't implemented any of this yet, but you get the idea. With the addition of these rooms, I decided to make some design adjustments to the castle's central hallway. Having direct access to various rooms from this point seemed to lack the right sense of build-up, so I'm removing 2 of these doors and converting the central one into a hallway instead. From here, you can now access the other rooms. I think having an adjoining corridor before entering a new room will add a certain level of anticipation when entering new areas of the castle. But I also think it allows me to add some more moments of design trickery to mess with the player. For example, imagine entering a corridor which seems normal at first, but then you notice a door at either end of it that seems to cut off a severe chunk of the corridor. The impossibility of it all just creates a sense of disorientation within the castle, making you question the sanity of its layout. It's a lot like The Haunting of Hill House, where the dimensions of the house are just slightly off to the point where it's enough to start driving its occupants slowly insane.
I'm disappearing inch by inch into this house.
To help me with this design, I've created a door system which handles how the player moves between the different rooms of the castle. Interacting with a door will take you through to the adjoining room. However, what I didn't tell you is that none of these rooms are actually physically connected with each other. That's right, this is a magic door, and so there is potential for the castle to have all kinds of time and space-defying logic in its layout. Let's take room A here as an example. If I add the other doors in the level and feed them into a randomizer I have created, I can have the player come out in a completely unexpected location. The probability of where you'll end up after entering room A is completely random, but when it comes to implementing this in the final game, there will be specific rules and logic to how these mysterious doors will operate. So far, I've blocked in the entirety of the castle's ground floor, and I've connected it via the door system. I've also created a specialized camera blueprint that allows for some dynamic camera angles whenever you enter certain rooms. If the player enters an area covered by this volume, it will trigger a change in the camera angle that tracks their movements. I think having some dynamic camera angles in key areas will enhance some parts of the game. How the NPCs will actually move around the castle itself will be handled through a path-based approach. Let me show you how it works. My initial idea was to have a cube move along a spline path and then have the NPC follow the cube using the AI move to node. However, I quickly found a problem with this method, in that the player can obstruct the NPC entirely. If the NPCs are going to have daily schedules that they follow, I can't risk them getting blocked. This led me to implement something I've wanted since the game's inception, a real-time game clock that tracks the in-game world's time. I've taken real-world time and translated it into units to measure the virtual time in the game world. The game runs at 30 frames per second, so multiplying the FPS by 2 equals 60 seconds of game world time. Every frame, 2 gets added to the clock until it reaches 60, at which point an in-game minute gets added. 60 in-game minutes adds a new hour, and once the clock hits 24, it resets and starts again. Each day within my game is comprised of this 24-minute cycle, and it has a direct effect on where the NPCs will be within the castle, depending on the time. Their movement through the castle itself is controlled via a series of calculations I've conducted to ensure that the different characters are in the right place according to the game's clock. Here's the clock alongside 4 different NPCs, each with their own path. They will start moving at a different specified time, represented here by the white number. The yellow numbers on the left represent the NPC's current distance along their path. This number is offset against the start time of each NPC, and will increase until the NPC reaches the endpoint of the spline. This is crucial in how I'm able to accurately position characters at the precise location needed based on the time of day. The first NPC began moving at exactly 6 o'clock, and they are positioned 642 units along the spline. So let's take the current distance, divide that by the NPC's movement speed, which is 6, multiply the result by the lowest time increment, which is 2, and that gives us the exact time it has taken the NPC to reach this point on the spline in game world seconds. So if I subtract 60, that gives me 1 minute. If I do it again, that gives me 2 minutes. And if I do it a final time, I get 3 minutes, which is 3 minutes, 34 seconds. With the NPC pathing and schedule system in place, I was bumping up against another problem. I mean, literally bumping up against a problem. This absolutely horrendous collision where instead of getting pushed out of the way, the character just gets teleported a few spaces back. This is a result of how Unreal Engine handles overlapping collision objects. It looks like absolute crap, and I'm honestly surprised this is the default method for handling collision like this. It makes me want to throw up chunks whenever I look at it. And so, I've gone about creating my own system for handling NPC collisions. Whenever the player is overlapping this volume, they will be constantly repelled until they are out of the NPC's way. Now, whenever the NPC bumps into the player, they will be gracefully pushed aside. I'm honestly quite proud of this. It gives a much smoother result than the default one in Unreal Engine. And of course, I've made this so it works on enemies as well, so there's really no excuse for me to get the player stuck anymore. Although there is a slight problem where if a pushed enemy overlaps another one, they still get teleported out of the way, but you know what, I think that's a problem for another day. After I got the collision mechanics working, I was ready to mix things up and get back to doing some artwork. This dull grey corridor was really starting to wear on me, so I eagerly began the process of arting it up. I've decided to make this area into a castle gallery of sorts. Having some light come through this window provides some relief to the castle's dark atmosphere. I've brought in some placeholder props to fill out the space and make it a little more interesting. With the right lighting and ambience, it really helps break up the monotony, don't you think? As a finishing touch, I've added an effect where parts of the environment get illuminated by the lantern when you're near them. This is similar to the lighting effect I used on the Manticore enemy. And that'll do it for this devlog. Thank you so much for watching. I'd like to take a moment to thank my Rumble Pack tier patrons for supporting the game. SDC Stringer and Big Stup. You guys are really making me feel it. And thank you as well to my 64-bit patrons. LRC Napkin, Yaya Damboos, Mason Stooksberry, Map Papa, Waro Duck, Melty Metroid, Daniel H. Hernandez, Starkium, Power Hungry Fool, Nicola Wallen, Bleak Bob, Twyla27, Robert M. Stwali IV, Baby Funky Kong, Void Kitten, Shinku Aura, Kanzen Sun, Bo Eckle, Great Mate, Gustav64, Decky Like Dude, Joel Acklin, Yawning Bear, Ezra Brunziel, Zombotic, Cole Walcott, Gnuff, Cassidy, Austin Linguist, Something Something, Cold Rad, Sebastian Soderquist, Nehey Ray, Ritzler, Cormac, Andy Crew Gaming, Mr. Joey Prosa, Tava, Duncan Famel, Parker Holly, Linkster777, Max Kasari, Pink81, Scylla Lizard, and Sexual Grapefruit. Thank you so much, and of course thank you to my 16-bit patrons as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next devlog.